Nick, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. So we're here to talk about your whole home buying and selling experience, what you went through. We first met each other in 2017, right? Is that right?
Yeah, 3 years. Yeah, maybe 2016.
2016, 2017.
Same thing.
On the 2007 Sedgwick property. I was selling that unit and you and Janelle came in and that's how we met. So you bought that. Do you remember what that process was like in terms of being a first-time home buyer and the things you worried about or the things that concerned you while you were doing it?
Well, yes, I do remember that. And personally, the things that concerned us, it was like, you know, regardless if you're buying a home or a condo, it just is the biggest purchase you've ever made. And there's no real way to understand like the implications of that. So I would say, you know, the upside of working with you, not to like immediately pat you on the back too much.
Yeah.
It quickly becomes, you know, you've got this big purchase, but like it was quickly understood like how to piece it up, and you know, it didn't really feel like we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was like much more manageable, but in the process of doing so, it's also always super shocking is like you spend a lot of time looking at places and researching and whatever, flipping through links, and then all of a sudden within like 24 hours you got to jump, and
Yeah.
it's such a fast, it's like such a sprint walk kind of experience where you're waiting and waiting and waiting. You see a place, and then these, you know, the biggest purchases of your life are sort of, you know, it requires action like immediately, which was, you know, kind of shocking. But I think the second time around we understood that and sort of used that to our advantage quite a bit.
I thought the second time around you guys really understood what was happening. I felt that you had a grasp on the market, and so when something did come up that looked good, you were ready because you could see what it was, you understood the values better. Instead of going into something blind, we were still guessing through the process.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely how it was. Like as you asked us, I wasn't able to recall a bunch of places that we saw the first time around, and it was only 3 years ago. Like
Yeah.
I'm sure, you know, my short-term memory might be to do with that, but I think like this time around, the difference is, and I've told this to a lot of folks that have like asked me, you know, should we be buying condos, should we be buying apartments, homes? It's just, you have to really mentally prepare for that sprint and walk. And like, if you're not ready to do a lot of research yourself and like make sure you find what you like, and then once it's there, snap your fingers and go, it's gonna be more stressful than it needs to be.
I think so too. Yeah, like exactly that, because if you're not prepared to move, then you just get disappointed. And I think some people go through this process and they're not ready to do that sprint. And so when it happens, they're let down.
Yeah.
And you can't be let down by the process. It just is what it is, and something else will come on the market and you just have to wait for it to happen. We didn't go through that this time. There wasn't any place that you guys really loved that went off the market quickly that you were ready to move forward with. I mean, we got the first one that really stood out. But I remember walking with you guys, and it was winter, because that's when we started. And I was just thinking about my cold feet in that place in Uptown. And if Janelle's right over here, his wife, sorry, I keep looking over there. But my feet were so cold. I remember walking through Uptown, like or Buena Park actually, being like, is this where you want to live? Is this where you should live? And it was the first place crossing over Irving Park.
Yep.
And I feel like I was after that place where the search got put on hold for a little bit. And then at that stage, you were still looking at 3 bedrooms too, like that, or was it right after that where the 3 bedrooms came into play and then we circled back to a 2 bedroom?
Yeah, I mean, mentally, I would like to say that we know exactly what we want, but when you remind me of that, it was pretty clear we had like no idea what we wanted. And maybe that's another good thing to sort of like, you know, debunk for people, is, you know, it's always a personal experience, and I'm sure people have like a neighborhood they're set on, but we really bounced around quite a bit, because, you know, Chicago, it's so easy to get around. I mean, sure, you fall in love with neighborhoods, but like we tend to go all over the city whenever we're out and about. So we jumped from, you know, like Boys Town to the house we saw with you in Buena Park. We jumped from 2 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms, and I think that process helped us sort of understand what we needed, maybe more than what we wanted. But that's another thing with, like, you know, you got the sprint and walk mentality, but you also, I think from our perspective, we were super flexible on location, and in the end, we ended up in Southport Corridor, which is probably where we wanted to be all along. And I think it was like, you kind of have to see for yourself what else is out there, because you can research it on your own, but it's a lot different when you sort of walk the neighborhood and walk inside, and it's a completely different feel.
I was just thinking about that place on Dakin, and that was the first place that really came out that we wanted to move forward on. And that place was gone so quickly, and it looked so good. And I think that one caught us off guard a little bit, because we had just started getting back into the search. And at that one, because that was, I'm like, Dakin's basically at the edge of Irving Park, or like right before you get to Irving Park. And even that was questionable at the time. You guys were considering, does this area matter or not? And your point about the area is really important, because a lot of people do go to so many different places. Even if you're tied or married to an area, you have to ask yourself, am I really?
Yep.
And I think you guys were one of the first clients I worked with where the location wasn't the number one thing. And that's usually where you start with someone. They're like, I want to be here.
Yeah.
And when you're working with someone who's like, I don't care, I want to be in 5 different neighborhoods, like I'm still talking to those clients from 3 years ago. They still haven't bought something because they don't really know. But you guys had a more determined search of, you knew exactly the type of home you wanted, even though it switched a little bit with bedrooms, but I feel like the style was clear.
Yep.
In terms of that feeling you get when you walk in for what you really wanted. And it's good to think of it as not being necessarily tied to the location, but maybe going with your heart if you know where you think you want to be. Like you said, you ended up where you wanted to be.
We definitely ended up where we wanted to be, and I feel like it's more, a factor of like availability, really.
Yeah.
Because Southport Corridor was always where our minds were set, like Lincoln Park, Lakeview. That sort of has become our home for the last 7 years, and we looked in a lot of places like Wicker Park and Bucktown, and we went up to Buena Park with you, and there's a lot of similar areas with the same kind of vibe, but there's just, not a lot of availability in Southport Corridor. It's a small little section of the city. And I feel like the reason we saw a bunch of places was because we wanted a specific feel. We wanted a home to sort of feel like a home versus an apartment in a building or, city dwelling. Like, we preferred that sort of like almost living like a single family home style. And so when we were looking at 3 bedrooms, that just naturally sort of moved us north-south. Like, you kind of have to get more for your buck by going elsewhere. But we got really lucky, I think, in the last one. And the same thing maybe happened the first time around. Like, seeing homes was, maybe you jump on one, but it's also sort of good to educate yourself. Like, we wouldn't have found, I think, this place, and like, I was ready to say yes once we opened the door on this place, because I knew, like, immediately as you open it and see it, it's like, okay, this is right. We've done our research. We've seen what else is out there, like, literally by walking in there. So it was an easy decision.
I felt the same way, because it was on a wider lot, it was on a double lot. So you felt the width right when we walked in.
Yep.
And then when I saw that dining room nook, I was like, okay, like, I feel like this is really gonna have potential. And I was just watching you guys being like, I'm always looking at my clients, like, look at their eyes, look where they go to. And it's never positive when someone walks in and they just start tearing it apart, like saying negative things. It's really positive when you see someone come in and they don't say anything, and they're just like looking. They're really looking at the details because they've already decided they like this room.
Yep.
And they're kind of inspecting it to find a problem. And I feel like that moves towards the direction of, okay, we like this, let's see if we really like it.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And that's what I mean by, like, you can have a picture of what you want in your mind, and Janelle and I had, we've had a list on our phones, like an iPhone note that says must have, and it changes just about every week. It's updated. And I think that's important too, because, like, you know what you want, and sure, we had, like, garage space, we had outdoor space as, like, kind of the two that rose to the top. The more we saw places, we realized the value of having those things. But then the rest of it, when you're, searching in the city, it's not like building a home out in the suburb. Like, you're going to have to sort of, like, you move these two things up and one kind of goes down. And that's sort of the golf analogy. Like, your driving might be good and your iron play might be good, but in order for those to be good, your putting has to suck. And the same thing happens, like, the outdoor space might be amazing, this space might be amazing, the bathrooms might need a little work, but that's to me, we found this place to be the perfect place for us because it had that upside. Like, a lot of those things were really great. Like, we have a rooftop and these great open spaces in the living room, but then the bathrooms might be a little bit older, but to us, we saw that as upside, and like, this is a good investment that maybe we can live into and improve and make kind of our space.
Yeah, and totally functional now. You can use them however long you need to use them, and whenever you decide you want to improve them, you can. And you kind of do your place room by room if you take that approach to it. Do you guys ever think of moving to the suburbs throughout the entire process?
Of course.
I don't even think it's of course. Like, now it's becoming I don't know if it's becoming a reality, but it's becoming more of a conversation topic of moving to the suburbs. How did that work for you?
I mean, speaking specifically right now, it's July 11th or whatever it is, and we're still sort of in the middle of the pandemic. I was pretty apprehensive actually to start looking, in March when stuff was really shutting down. I was, everybody I'm sure had the same feeling, like, what's the market going to do? And I feel like it kind of proved us wrong. It sort of just, like, sure, it was volatile for a little bit, but it kind of held steady.
Yeah.
And I think why I was apprehensive was because I was worried that, okay, with everybody moving remotely, like, we're seeing that it's working, at least for office jobs and places where you don't really need to, like, be hands-on. And I was worried that, I was wondering, I was like, are cities gonna lose their magnetism a little bit? Which is obviously a ridiculous thing to, like, internalize.
But people are thinking that. Like, that's exactly why I brought it up. You're right, and magnetism is such a perfect word for that.
Yeah.
And that's my thought. I'm not going to say it's a fear. I don't buy into it. I think whether it's New York or Chicago or even San Francisco or LA, it's like people are always going to gravitate towards cities. There's always going to be somewhere you can walk. Like, I love where you guys live because literally, in a block you're on Southport, and there's 20 options of anything you could do.
Yep.
So why wouldn't you do that? But with everyone getting concerned about it, you have to wonder. So what was your mindset going through that?
Well, it was, we were sort of watching it happen. Like, we were watching, New Yorkers flee the city. Like, we fled Chicago for just open space, you know what I mean? Like, it's much easier in the suburbs to walk out on a yard, and like, not a lot of people in the city and apartment living sort of have that luxury, which you kind of realize maybe it was taboo for a while. Like, I'm sure a lot of people like me, young professionals, you sort of get this, like, cloud over you if you, like, decide to become a suburb person, and they're like, everybody's a little bit like, oh, so you're like, you're really slowing down, huh? But I was always curious because I was like, are they going to lose their magnetism, and is the suburb market going to start growing more, especially with remote workers? Like, I know if I could go 100% remote for the rest of my career, I would live in freaking, like, Montana, if I could, and, like, still have a job in Chicago, but I would much rather be in a mountain somewhere. And so the process was just like everything during the pandemic. It was really flip-floppy. One day we were like, there's no way that cities are going to lose their magnetism. Like, it's a city. They're cities for a reason. They've stood the test of time forever. But then on the other hand, it was like, but maybe this is a good opportunity to sort of see the suburb market rise and catch it now. And then, like, maybe over the next year, as remote working becomes more and more popular, maybe the suburb market will continue to grow maybe faster than the city.
Well, I've thought about it. We're both from Barrington, coincidentally, and Barrington's been not a distressed market, but it hasn't been a positive market for years, like literally since 2007. And you have to wonder if places like that, it's like all of a sudden, hey, you can buy a home in Barrington for $500,000 and live on 5 acres maybe, or live on a couple acres, and is that something that someone wants to do? And now people have more time, it's like you can maintain it, you can actually use the space. And I really wonder what's going to happen. And I was reading about like the smaller cities people are talking about living in, whether it's Austin, I don't think Denver really counts, but like Austin or Carolinas or places like that, or Tennessee, Nashville. Well, people are going to start moving there, and they already have. Like, that started before all this. And now those are going to become kind of overgrown. Because I know Austin, the infrastructure was built for 700,000 people, and now it's way above that, like 10 times or whatever it is. It's much larger than that. And they're already struggling with that as people move to these places. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I actually have a friend, a couple who live in Austin, and they just bought a totally, like fixer-upper. They bought it's in a historic district, but she's an interior design major, and so I'm sure she's like sort of just waited for this moment. But I think they bought that to sort of escape like what Austin is sort of becoming. It's becoming like really busy. But I think like, for us, we just had so much time, and so it was really easy to look at all these places in the suburbs, like Barrington, for example. These homes that when I was growing up were $3 million homes were laying vacant on the market for 6 months, and they were reduced down to like $400,000 in Whinstone, which is like a private gated community. And they're like 8,000 square feet, just these obscene mansions. And I was like, man, I mean,
you couldn't build it for that.
No,
you couldn't buy the land and build it.
And we're wondering too. It's like, obviously we're not going to buy that, and obviously nobody's going to buy that, because anybody who looks at the 10 years of its history, it's just it's too risky to like, maybe you can get in for 400, but then like, is it ever going to get back up there, or is this just going to dust away? And so I think seeing that sort of reassured us that we did belong in the city, because it was just as unknown out there. And I think, like you said, like it's sort of, I don't know, I think they both ebb and flow for different reasons, but I think it'll always stay and sort of balance each other out.
I think so, and if that does happen, we have less demand in the city, well, the city's going to be more enjoyable. If there's fewer people here, Adam and I were talking on the way here, and we were talking about the beaches. The beaches are such this common conversation, because when are the beaches going to open? But like, I don't know, it's Chicago, and I don't go to the beach that often. I feel like a lot of times the beach is filled with people that aren't from the city, kind of like the weekends, like Saturday and Sunday. Like, I don't want to go out Saturday and Sunday. I'll go out Tuesday. I'll go out Thursday. Those are great nights. But on Saturday, like, what's the point? We live here. We're not here for this. And there's so many areas that are just filled with suburban people on the weekends. And I feel like that was the fear of the city with the beaches. And that's why they haven't opened them. So like, so many people are just going to come here. We don't need to increase the traffic that's going there.
Yeah, we didn't think about it that way, because we were talking about it on the drive here too.
Right, it's a common conversation all the time.
Yeah, we're like, man, Janelle's saying, man, I really missed going to the beaches this year. And it's true though. It's like, it is part Chicago, but the beaches are also, it's a beach, so like every surrounding suburb that sort of doesn't have the luxury of like wide open spaces, they're obviously going to come here. And I didn't think about it that way, because I remember driving downtown Chicago, and it was pretty nice at the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, I grew up in Barrington, and even now traffic's picked up a little bit, but
still not where it was.
It's down, I can get into the city in 40 minutes versus an hour. And in selling an apartment and making sure we are sort of out of there to allow listings and showings happen as quickly as possible, it's been amazing to just kind of jet back and forth from the city to the suburbs. Everybody's surprised on how much we do that. But when it's 30 to 40 minutes versus an hour and 20 in traffic, it's just a huge difference. And I don't know if I'm sure it'll go back, but it would be nice if the city sort of like relaxed on the density a little bit.
Yeah. The part, when you go around the side and it's all cement and has the different levels, all that's still open and people are using that. So I feel like if you were in the city, that's the place to go, so you can still enjoy the front. You just can't put your toes in the sand. You can walk through and do that if you want to. I think when autonomous vehicles happen, like when that's a real true thing, that's going to be the real test of the city. Because if I can just go watch Netflix in my car, and then my car drives me to my house, like, does it really matter where you live?
No, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I would love that.
Yeah, me too. I don't think I'd live in the city anymore. I really, as much as I love the city, I don't know if I would. I wouldn't see the point.
Well, we both commuted for a while when we were younger. We did the thing where you graduate college and then you stay at home for a year to try and make use of your really, really small salary, really small income.
Pay it off, right?
And it was, I mean, everybody, I would encourage them to do that if they can. but I miss that a little bit because I commuted on the Metro train, and yeah, like it's a long commute, but it was the only time I read books.
Yeah.
It was the only time I got like extra work done, because versus staying in the office, you're sort of on a schedule, but you have an hour to yourself where you're not driving. And just the driving commute, I know my sister does that from the suburbs into the city, and it's too much time spent where, like, you know, that's time you sort of want to outsource to a vehicle or to an autonomous vehicle or to a train. But that'll probably change the suburb landscape quite a bit, but who knows, it's 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Well, you've seen me pull up on a divvy, and you've seen me jump out of Ubers, and you've seen me in shorts, and you've seen me in suits. And it's the reason I've been holding off on having a car. I haven't had a car in 3 years, and the first 3 years were great. It was like, I did it for a month before I sold my car, and it was a no-brainer. I was like, I'm done very quickly, because I freed up so much extra time with me sitting in the back seat, and all this extra stuff that I would do at the end of the day, or I had to get back to people, and just, it was this workload I didn't want to deal with right after having dinner and right after I got home. I don't do anymore. But with the pandemic, all the prices have gone up so high. It's been a weird flux of activity, but there's fewer things I'm doing where I need a car. So I don't know, it's strange. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes. But for the first time in 3 years, I'm like, should I be buying a car?
Yep.
It's the first time I've even considered it.
It also came up on the drive here. I think if we waited 6 months, we would have gotten an electric car.
You think so?
I think just we had to get a new car because the car we had was like about to die.
Dying.
Yeah, it was done. It was 12 years old, and the air conditioning had broken. And
oh no!
Right now, like this, we were struggling last summer, and last summer was cool. I don't think it ever got above 90s.
This last week has been insane.
Yeah, and now we're seeing like 100 degrees. We were baking last summer, so we had to get a car. But maybe now that we're talking about it, you're sort of making my gears turn, and maybe I'll just have this car for a year, and then it was like, oh, let's buy a Volvo and have a 10-year car and like be responsible people. But it sounds like the more responsible thing is probably to get electric.
Yeah. Well, and it's a hard decision, right? And for me, it was like, I can either have a car, but then every time you get an Uber, you're like second guessing it. But if you don't have a car, you can just do Uber everywhere all the time, and it doesn't seem to add up in the same way.
Yep.
Or if it does add up to the same number, you're like, okay, I don't have this car, but like, is my car really an asset? Like, is it something I really want to own?
Well, it's tough in the city. The only reason we had a garage spot as a must-have is because we wanted to treat our car like an asset, where the previous car was old and we parked it on the street and we didn't really care about it. It was just, it was basically a bike, you know what I mean?
A grocery getter.
Yeah, exactly. It's for groceries and moving around, but we both have big families who are having a lot of kids, and maybe that's on our horizon too, and so it just made sense to get something a little bit like more than just a bike that takes gas. And so the garage spot was really, really necessary in my mind, and I feel like I was shocked at how expensive renting garage spots is, and that's why we needed to get it sort of in the home and make that a priority for us, because it's several $100s a month just to rent an outdoor space, which no wonder nobody wants cars. And Uber's going through the roof, but I don't know, that was a must-have for us for a lot of reasons, and I think the monthly cost was probably the number one reason.
When we were searching for your place, did you like it when we could just walk up and have a lockbox and go see it by ourselves? Or did you prefer if there was an agent there to explain things and show us the property?
That's a good question. I know we've talked about it. We definitely preferred to see places just with you and a little bit more in private, because that's how you experience your home every day. I think it's always, I understand that a listing agent should be there for a lot of reasons, but maybe one of the better things to come out of the pandemic is changing that. I think there's a lot of plus sides to the pandemic. One, you don't have to share your food with people anymore. Two, finally people are polite and don't bump into you, and
or just go to the other side of the street.
Just get your personal space. And then for real estate, I definitely enjoyed just seeing it with our agent. It felt more private. You can kind of relax a little bit when there's another agent there. You can't really speak freely.
Yeah.
I'm sure people do, but I'm hyper conscious of, people around me, and I wouldn't want to, you can't really speak your mind. And like, I think like I'm doing right now, I tend to just talk out loud and like think out loud. And that's important for me when you're seeing a place, because if it's not said, then your partner that you're going to buy it with, or the agent that's helping you look for new places, they're not in your head, so they don't understand what you're thinking and what's wrong with this place unless you say it. And I feel like that listing agent being there is just an obvious inhibitor to, buyers finding the right place and being communicative and free with their thoughts. So
I've always struggled with the idea, because early in my career, you're trying to differentiate yourself. You're trying to show something that makes you stand out. And being there in person was a big thing. Even though it happens a lot in the city, it's very common, just showing the difference and what the value can be of doing it. But as I've progressed in my career and you learn more and you do more things and you have conversations with clients like we're having now, you learn it's like, I don't know, does me being there really provide value? And when someone, turn that off. So with that, I think part of the problem is when you're selling something, if an agent walks in and is like, look at this beautiful kitchen, and we all look at each other and we're like, I mean, the kitchen's okay.
Yeah.
And then they're like, and this fireplace and this mantle, and you're just like, then it becomes this kind of obnoxious, sarcastic feeling, like, because we're looking at each other. As soon as the agent looks away, we're all looking at each other like, what's he talking about?
Yeah.
And it degrades the experience and the property, because instead of focusing on the highlights and what we want to actually talk about, there becomes this strange relationship with someone who's trying to sell you the unit.
Yep.
And I've always said real estate really doesn't sell, or you don't have to sell real estate. It sells itself. Like,
yep.
It is what it is. People are going to walk in and they know what it feels like. Now, you can enhance a property, you can stage it, you can make it look nice. And I think you guys really experienced that when we sold your place, because you guys took the time and put the effort in. And I really thank you for doing that. But you were the beneficiary of it. Like, we sold it quickly.
Yep.
We had a lot of showings. It happened, in 7 days?
Yeah, and that had to have been just, I know that was because we were elsewhere, and
yes.
We just didn't have to talk about scheduling. We just said yes to every showing, which was great. But it's really true that there doesn't really need to be a sales pitch when it comes to homes. They sell themselves, and I think that's why a lot of car companies like Carvana have popped up, because cars are the same thing. They sell themselves. Like, you don't need somebody explaining it. And I think it's actually usually a negative experience. It would be amazing for somebody to debate me on that, because I could never see it being a positive experience. Like, I don't find homes to be intricate or confusing, no matter how big they are, and I feel like you need to experience it for yourself. I don't need somebody to explain it. And there was one showing in particular where you got there before me and saw it with my wife, and like both were pretty big fans. I won't be specific about which place, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
That was the one in Buena Park, right?
That was the one in Buena Park.
Yeah.
And you both really liked it. And then when I showed up, I was sort of like I had my hand held by the listing agent the whole time, and he was walking me around. I couldn't even think. Like, I didn't even know what I was looking at, because he was talking the whole time, and I was like, I work in advertising. I'm very conscious of shilly sales, and I felt like I was being, he was like trying to sort of like veil stuff and like just like fog me a little bit, because we were talking about life. We weren't talking about the unit and what I was looking at. So I was being walked through and having to multitask a conversation with him as I was trying to inspect the place.
because he's trying to talk to you about you. Yeah.
Yeah, and it became, it might have been a good place, but my first experience, like walking through what might have been my future home, was like it was sort of tainted. Like I couldn't get that out of my head, and I was like, why am I being sold this? What is being hidden from me?
Yeah.
That, like, when you don't have a listing agent there, nothing against listing agents, but like people will see different things in your home. And like you said, you can talk about the good things a lot more freely. You can talk about the bad things and understand, like, are they really bad? Where if I say something, isn't quite to my liking in an apartment, I don't want an answer onto why.
A rebuttal.
Yeah.
Like, not even an answer, but it's like, no, you're not looking at it right. And And it's like having a conversation with one of your friends who's that like combative friend, or always has the right answer, or always wants to argue with you about something. And like eventually you're just like, I don't want to bring up any topics. Like you're going there and you're like, let's just leave this topic alone before we walk in the door when you're like going to that person's house.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like I don't think there's a big mystery around homes. I'm sure there's a lot of new technology that requires a little bit of explanation.
Like an FAQ sheet, just right when you walk in?
Yeah, which is fine. Like,
Yeah.
like that's fine. But you know, people live in spaces 100% of their life. They don't really need explanations of.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all live in homes.
Yeah.
And you're here to explain the home to me.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, you know what? That reminds me of Kyle. Remember that showing?
Yep.
That place in Boys Town?
Yep.
Yeah, and that was the same thing. It was just, that place had such a strange layout. And like after 5 minutes of being in there, you're also like, I don't want to be in here anymore. Like I clearly know this isn't for me. This isn't for my clients. This isn't going to be a winner. And you got to let the listing agent do their thing.
You do, and you have to do that with everything, right? It's about being polite. But that one, I didn't have as big of a problem with that. He was actually like really willing to sort of let us be and do our thing, and it felt like he was just there to sort of like be security.
Yeah.
But also there is that like, again, you walk into a place, you know very quickly if you want to walk 10 more steps, and then if you want to walk 10 more steps, you know if you want to keep exploring the place, and there is that sort of like, you have to be polite and stay in a half hour to make it seem like you use their time wisely, but then at the end of the day, really what you're doing is just like wasting both of your time.
Yeah.
So
I completely agree, and I struggle with it as a listing agent because some clients require it of you, and they act like they think that you being there is going to help the sale, and it's a compliment, and that's part of the reason they hired you. But at the end of the day, you're like, I can do a video online, I can do a 3D floor plan, I can just do like a curated video or a regular video. We have great photos, there's a floor plan. Like, what else do you really need? And nowadays, what I really like, when people are looking at homes, and I experienced this with you too, you've already been through the home. Mm-hmm. You've done the 3D floor plan, you've walked through, and you're kind of in there just to validate the thoughts you already have.
I think that's critical too. The marketing of places, like you've done a really good job of being 10 steps ahead of that. And I've seen it, you know, we have friends who are trying to sell their home, and it's a much, much nicer home, but they don't have, you know, a Matterport or a Real Vision. They don't have a 3D plan that you can sort of walk through. They don't have the things and technology that you would expect from like a higher value listing.
Sometimes there's multi-million-dollar homes that don't have these things.
It's really surprising because, yeah, I've seen multi-million-dollar homes that we just sort of peruse for like the hobby of looking at stuff we can't afford.
You and the rest of America.
Yeah, but like sometimes they only have 5 photos, and I was like, who in their right mind would spend, like who's willing to spend this money would go see this place having only seen 5 photos?
Yeah.
Like, the internet has changed everything, and it changed it 20 years ago. So I'm kind of surprised that like there's still that illusion in real estate. Like that one we saw in Wrigley with Kyle, like those photos were they were like, you know, only 100 or like 800 pixels wide. So when you're at that low resolution of a photo, it's sort of, you know, you can hide a lot of imperfections, and I find like, I guess you sometimes have to do that, but my industry, I look at things a little bit more in detail, and I find like we probably sold our place because of the marketing. I think more than anything, like people expect that. And
your furniture. Like I was there for her walkthrough, and I saw her walk in, and I see her face, and she's like, this isn't the space I bought. Right? And I see it all the time. It happens with people so often, you wouldn't believe it. And you can just see the like, it's not heartbreak, it's not disappointment, but it's a little bit of disappointment actually.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, they had really nice stuff. Now I need to get really nice stuff. And that same day they're handing over, whether it's 15 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever the number is, they're already spending a large sum that they're already uncomfortable with, or just is a big number. It's probably the most money they've ever handed to somebody or wired or whatever. It's probably the first time people ever wire money in their life. Mm-hmm. And I saw it on her face, and I'm just wondering, like, you're always concerned because you're like, you're not gonna try and, you know, back out of this, and it's pretty hard to at that stage. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The staging is really important, the marketing leading up to it. And it's about setting the frame and the mindset so when someone does see it, it's exactly what they saw online.
Yep.
And you know, some agents use a much wider lens, and so the place comes in like, I want more realistic lenses. I want something to look right when it walks in. So when you come in, you're just like, this is exactly what I thought it was. Instead of the opposite. You know, I'm sure we walked into places and you're like, wait a second, this is smaller.
That's what I mean by the marketing being important. It's not important to put high resolution photos and 3D walkthroughs so I can see like, is this place in bad shape or something? It's important to be transparent because that's what people expect from these new age companies. That's what you expect from Carvana. That's the whole impetus of companies like that. That's their motivation for creating those companies, is transparency. And because the alternative is if you feel hoodwinked, if you feel like, oh, they used fisheye lenses and this place is half the size, then all of a sudden when you finally step foot in it, you're pissed.
Yeah.
Nothing can change
exactly
that.
It.
Nothing is going to make you think like maybe let me look deeper. It feels like you were like sort of slapped around a little bit, and it feels like you're sort of being manipulated before you even thought about putting an offer on. So I think, you know, it's not about marketing for the sake of marketing in the old like snake oil marketing. It's marketing for the sake of transparency, because like you said, it's important. And you know, to our place's point, the space was always the same. The space never changed. You walk through it, and yeah, there's nice stuff, but that's sort of the requirement of homes anyways. And so like when we bought our new place, we were very conscious to make sure that our budgets were in a position where like we knew we were buying this place and we're going to immediately invest into making some quick cosmetic updates, spend like a few weeks redoing floors. And then the other big chunk of change that we made sure we set aside was because, okay, we're growing in a new apartment, our old furniture that's got to go away. And now we need to invest in a lot of new furniture, because you will kind of set yourself up for mental failure if you, go in not sort of thinking that you're buying a new house and you need new furniture. And I think that sort of leads me to the last point, which is about virtual staging, which I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's important for places that can't be staged, because empty spaces just don't quite show the same on real estate sites. You need to be able to visualize it, and a lot of people aren't, don't have the tools to sort of visualize it themselves. But the difference is when you see it staged and then when you go see it in person, when you see it staged virtually and you see it in person, it's like, well, that couch didn't actually fit here, and it's a little bit different. So not all places deserve it, but I think like physical staging also will sell your place more than like any photos will.
If they were virtual staging, would you like them to have a picture of it blank right afterwards? Like, what's the best setup so you don't feel deceived as a buyer?
Yeah, I mean, that's the more information is obviously the way to transparency, so that would definitely help. And like I said, if there's no alternative, I think virtual staging is important because it allows people to picture themselves there. Where again, we've got the same friend who's trying to sell their home and it's empty, but had they have taken photos when they had their furniture in, they had the most beautiful furniture I've ever seen from Restoration Hardware. It was fantastic. Like, it was the coziest like place we'd been in, and I was like, I would have sold in a second. But now it just sort of looks like an open room, and it's too hard to imagine where you're gonna put stuff without like programs that can literally put a sofa there.
Do you know why they waited or why they didn't photograph it?
I think it was a matter of like when they moved, and they they moved like way before they actually put it on the market.
Okay.
So I think they had gotten rid of everything, but it's just an example that like transparency is key, but I also think that furniture is really important because it's hard for a lot of people to visualize what to do with empty space.
The process of buying and selling, because you just did both, what did you hate about it? What would you change? Like right off the top of your head, what's the first thing you think of you didn't like the way this was handled? And it can be about me too. I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm sure I dropped the ball somewhere.
No, I don't think you did actually.
Well, that's good.
That is good. Let's see, what do we hate about buying a place? The things that I think maybe we didn't hate, but
It can even be like while you're under contract, like that process.
right, yeah, this time around, it was quite different. So the first time around we bought like a small 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment, and it was very simple, and we were just buying it. It was also a situation where you were helping a buyer from afar and helping us, or a seller from afar, you were helping us. And so it was just the communication lines, we had one point of contact. It's very simple. And then this go around, trying to juggle a sale with a purchase, the thing that people don't understand that's going to frustrate you is the amount of communication required.
Yeah.
There's immediately, upwards of 25 people you're employing technically as a home buyer or a home seller, and they are immediately like getting to work. And I think one of the things that we actually were, I think it was our lender, was really grateful of us was our communication and being really quick. And I can only imagine the amount of, we probably sent over 1,000 emails over the course of a month selling
Probably.
it. And I can only imagine if you're not quick on that and if you're not sort of diligent, it becomes much hairier. But regardless if it went smooth or not, I definitely, it's not fun. All the emailing, all the documentation, it's a lot of work.
You reminded me that on the first transaction, I was representing both parties. Did you feel like that was smoother? Did you ever feel like, were you ever concerned about your ability to negotiate because I was in the middle of both parties? Or what did you think?
Well, it's a good comparison. The first time around, yeah, you represented the seller and us, and then this time around we had you and then another agent who we didn't even meet. And I feel like the difference was we just had conversations about stuff the first time around, and it didn't really feel like negotiating. It was like, okay, what's practical to ask and why, and like what's sort of the right price for these things. Where this time around, because it was sort of like Team A versus Team B, it definitely felt like we were versus each other. Mm-hmm. And it was something as small as like, she wants a bookshelf, but for whatever reason that like felt like really contentious.
Yeah.
And it's so official when it's on legal letterhead. It's like a much different feeling when you have two sort of realtors as like by proxy, and it just became like, I'm not a confrontational person, so that sort of became a very different experience. And I would say the first experience was better just because it was smooth and fast and easy, and like I said, it didn't feel like negotiating. It was just sort of like doing what's right for both parties.
Yeah, that's exactly how I like to describe it.
Yeah.
I'm just a conduit, and it's just easier communication, because that seller, they know what they want. They're already setting what price they have in their mind. They already know what they want. You as a buyer, you're like, okay, I'm only going to spend this. And between there is this little gray area that we have to figure out, how do we come together? How do we make sure both parties get everything they want? Mm-hmm. And when there's two people, it does become contentious sometimes. And in this situation, on the sell for you, like, I don't even know if I helped with that, because there was the furniture and the things. And I know I felt like Janelle and I were more on the same page, because we're like, why is she asking for this? Why are we doing this? And I actually felt that you were the more level-headed person, being like, listen, let's get this over with. It's not a big deal. And then at the same time, I remember when that was done, I was like, well, we did get that like extra $1,500 out of her anyway in the beginning, or like extra $1,000, which kind of just evened it out to begin with.
It was almost, I think, $4,000 or so.
A lot more than, yeah.
Yeah, for the price of our home was like a significant increase. But to me, like, almost back to the earlier point about, when people see the home for the first time and they see your furniture and they're like amazed because they have nice stuff, and then when they walk through it and it's empty, they're like, bum. Like, furniture's furniture. Get over it. Like, if it's not an heirloom piece, or if it's not important to you, like if it helps you sell your home, go sell the home and buy it again. Yeah. Like, it's not something like, and that stuff as a home buyer really makes a big difference for people. I remember she wanted the shelves that were in our bathroom, which like once I saw that in the contract, I knew, I was like, okay, we got her. Like, we can ask for whatever we want. She wants this, she wants the home. And I say that because those shelves cost me less than $2 to make. They were pieces of plywood, little hooks, and then black twine but you know, they were Pinteresty, like they
Yeah.
looked cute, and so they felt custom and they looked nice. But all that stuff, like furniture, is so temporary, where the home is so much bigger than that. But it is funny how $500,000 homes, like the negotiations and the contention usually comes all the way down to like replace the toilet.
Yeah.
And like it's hard to understand if like you're a first-time home buyer that stuff isn't important. But you know, like I think being on the sell side and the buy side has sort of made me understand the value of things differently, because as a buyer you want to say no the second a floorboard creaks, and you're like, this is, you know, rats must live under there, and you think the worst. But as a seller, it's like, she wants a bookshelf, give her the bookshelf. Like, we got, you know, $5 more grand. It's like, it's a bookshelf, it's fine.
Well, you guys weren't emotionally tied to your place, but it's even worse when people are. They've been in this home for 20 years, and they're like, what do you mean they want to replace the floors? Like, what don't they like about our kitchen? And it's very frustrating. It's your home, once you decide to sell your home, it's no longer an asset. It's a liability. It's sitting. You're paying taxes. If you're in a condo, you're paying HOA every month. Like, it is just costing you every day to not make that decision. And some people get tied up in the emotional aspect of, I raised my family here and it was good for my family, why isn't it good for them? And it's kind of crazy. And I think that's gonna change with generations, because people are renting longer than ever before, and they're gonna see a space as a space. But I think when you're in a space for a long time and you have all these memories tied to it, it probably is difficult to leave it. I mean, I know you just bought this place and we're talking about contractors before this and the changes you're making to the space, but do you have an idea of how long you'll be in there? Like, have you and Janelle talked about it?
Yeah, we have. I mean, we're anywhere from 3 to 7 years, depending. I mean, it's only a 2-bed, 2-bath, so the people who lived there before, ironically, were sort of connected to via friends and family. So
That was crazy.
It was, yeah, it's a really wild coincidence. It was like a good friend of my wife's sister, and that was just nice. Like, it feels nice. It's like, okay, like somebody we really know used this space, and they used it well, actually. They had 2 children there in a 2-bed, 2-bath, and I'm imagining if they could have figured that out. It's got to be a fantastic location. It's a fantastic building with fantastic neighbors. I know that. We've already met most of the neighbors.
That one neighbor was great. We met him on the walkthrough.
They're all really good, and so, you know, the timeline for us is just what kids, you know, how we can manage it with, you know, 1 or 2 kids, and that'll dictate that. But I don't really. Janelle and I are really meticulous about how we design our places, and not to the point where it's obnoxious, but to the point like where it's done sort of right the first time, and furniture's built right the first time. But I don't really feel like we're ever emotionally attached to it, because like you said, like, you're borrowing it. Nobody's ever maybe somebody lives in their home from the day they're born until they die, but it's your space, but like, you're just borrowing it, and when it's time to sell it, like, it's a box, and it might look a certain way, but like, the next person is going to want to put different stuff in the box, and you shouldn't ever be emotional about that. I find that kind of funny to hear that like people do that, but I see it happen. There's a family selling their home across the street from my neighbors, and we've seen 6 open houses. We've seen probably 20 couples come in and look at it, and it's not sold. And so we looked at the photos for the first time, and I was like, oh, Scott's kitchen's sold. Like, it's too expensive. So if it's that price and the kitchen's sold, it's easy to say no to. Like, you have to understand that, okay, maybe the price needs to go down to sell this because somebody needs $75,000 for a kitchen redo. But I'm sure they like their kitchen.
It's always a struggle having that conversation with a seller. Just this morning, right before we started this, one of my clients who listened to me, he redid his kitchen and he painted, and that was it. Like, he redid some countertops and painted cabinets. Purely the only thing he did. We have an offer. We just put it on the market 2 days ago.
Yep.
And our response to the offer was, we have a lot of showings. And it was too low. But it was like, hey, we have a lot of showings. Not even responding to this. Like, don't start off so low. And when you do the things, you have to look at it as if you were buying. And some people look at their old kitchen, they're like, oh, well, they'll come in and change it. Like, well, not at that price.
Not that price.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge thing for us in buying this place. Like, the kitchen is great. The bathrooms are great. The kitchen doesn't really need updating. Like, a lot of people would live there happily for 20 years, and it looks totally fine. The bathrooms kind of smell a little like the early aughts. Like it's a lot of beige. And like, I find it hilarious that everybody paints their home gray and beige. I've never met a person who's told me their favorite color is gray or beige, so I don't know why people paint their homes these colors. But other than that, like the price, we waited, we saw it reduce. We were like pretty comfortable with the bottom line that we set for ourselves on this place, because we knew that there was upside. And I feel like when you're selling a home, like ours was easy because when you sold it to us the first time, it was already redone.
Yeah.
And so it was a brand new renovation, was only 3 years old at that point. And aesthetics unfortunately matter. Like if you're selling an older looking home, you have to look in the mirror and just sort of be okay with that and what that means. And that usually means bringing your price down.
Yeah. Through the whole process, anything that you really didn't like in terms of selling the house, outside of what we talked about, but is there anything else that stood out?
No, I can see how making updates to selling your house would be something that would be really hard to sort of grapple with. We made minimal ones, and it was like a few $1,000s, and that felt like oh, is this money wasted? You know what I mean? We refinished our tub and stuff, but I think Janelle and I spoke about it, and well worth spending a lot of money making sure your home is ready to go. And if that requires new countertops, spend the money and do it, because when somebody walks through and sees a brand new tub, they don't question, is this bathroom okay? But when they see a chipped tub or old countertops or dirty floorboards, they're going to question what else is wrong with this place.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want somebody to do is to start asking themselves questions when they're walking through your home. So I think the updates, they allow people to walk in and within seconds say yes. And I'm fairly certain that people buy homes within the first minute of walking through.
I think so too.
So
I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah.
Because when things get heavy on your mind, and you can think about it as design, you can think about it as a house, but when you walk through a house and you start noticing, like, okay, that's wrong, you're no longer focusing on what's right, and those things just add up, and it's just like, out of here. And we walk through a lot of homes that happen immediately, and that's why you don't want it to happen right when you walk in. Through the buying process, how did you feel about the communication? And we talked about all the emails, but do you feel like everyone got back to you quickly, that it was easy to get a hold of people when you needed to?
After we were under contract?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, through the buying process was amazing. I don't know how these people, from real estate attorneys to you, real estate agents to lenders, I don't know how they managed to communicate so quickly and efficiently, because I would assume we're one of like 20 deals they're negotiating on any day.
For the mortgage people,
yeah.
Figure like 100.
Yeah, that blows my mind, especially with, we're in industries where we're dealing with, we're in technology-focused industries, so the management of files, I think we probably stored 78 PDFs over the process of this, which is just...
I think you actually know that number.
Yeah, that would absolutely cripple my parents' ability to manage this sort of thing. And maybe it's COVID related because it's all virtual, but I was super impressed with that during the buying process, and it might have just been good people. We definitely listened to you quite a bit and took your recommendations on who to work with, and this time around it worked really well. The first time around, I think maybe we missed a few things. We used a family friend as an attorney, and we actually missed $3,000 in a tax exemption that our new attorney, who was a connection of you, found us. Yeah. So we're getting that money back.
I thought that guy was on drugs. I seriously did when we were in that room. I remember that. Oh my God, we have to talk about that. So yeah, we were sitting in the room and he was talking about the different types of ownership, whether it's tenants in common or joint tenancy, and he hadn't had that conversation with you guys, and you guys were just about to get married. And so you weren't married yet, but you're buying this home together, and it was this, we're at the closing, and there's this uncomfortable conversation where you two have to look at each other and be like, well, we're getting married, right? We're gonna own this, we're not gonna get divorced.
We weren't even engaged.
It was terrible. Oh, that's what it was, yeah. It was terrible. I asked him to leave. Now that I think about it, right? Didn't I say, I was like, can you leave and can I talk to them?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that might have happened.
Yeah, I did. I asked him to leave because he didn't. It was such a drop of the ball.
Yeah.
Like in such a big way.
But that's, yeah, I sort of like give people the benefit of the doubt because I like I said, 78 PDFs, you know, I don't understand how mentally these people can like keep track of all this stuff. And so God bless them for doing so, because as a buyer or a seller, you're not, I'm sure some people have a checklist and they're going through the day-to-day, like, did we do this yet? Did we do that yet? But you're gonna drive yourself insane if you try and do that.
There's no perfect checklist.
Yeah.
People ask me for that sometimes, and I'm like, I can send you this generic form, and it's not even generic. Like, I created it. I took a generic form and added my own ones to it. But like, things pop up. Like, yeah, we're gonna go through this step, and then we're gonna go through that step. But there's like 5 mini steps, or extensions of the bullet point, like the next bullet point that comes down, and then you have another one. It just doesn't really work.
Yeah, and lawyers, they're a different species. Like,
Yeah.
so they'll always be interesting to deal with because they deal with words, and they're better with words than we are. But they're not afraid to let you know that. And
Yeah.
it's always like a strange process because there's so many different industries sort of like crashing together at the sale of a home. But ours was great. Yeah, I felt like everybody worked well together.
That's good. What advice do you have for anyone who's buying a home or selling a home? Just, I've given a lot of advice here, but just anything that's simple and streamlined of what they should or shouldn't do.
We can start with selling a home because I feel like that's the thing I've sort of learned the most from in this process. And in selling a home, I think marketing and transparency is probably, after this conversation, going to be the thing I tell everybody. And transparency in your marketing, I think, is what I mean. Like, if you're selling your home, make sure people know what they're getting when they look at your listing. I think that point of, deception is where homes aren't sold. Like, if you see something online and then it's different in person, you've lost every single buyer that steps foot in your place, no matter what. And then I would also say, when you're selling your home, it's like a big sort of pill to swallow, but like, you need to do the updates and listen to your real estate agent on what they think you should update. Because if they noticed it when walking through your place and think you should update it, then every single person that walks through there is going to have that same question, and that could possibly be a deterrent to selling your home. So those would be my 2 pieces of advice for selling any size home, our 1-bed, 1-bath, or the 5-bed, 4-bath, beautiful suburban Cape Cod that I'm seeing next to my parents go unsold. And I haven't walked through it, but just looking at the listing, I know why it's not selling. And then switching gears to buying a home, this is probably the most cliche answer or piece of advice I could say, but like, flexibility is probably the number one thing. And when you're buying it with a partner, that's always going to be challenging because mentally you're going to have different must-haves. Like, my must-haves were protecting our car and having a garage space, which is essentially storage space, and having outdoor space. Janelle's were a little bit different, and I think the flexibility and understanding, like, okay, you've got 7 must-haves, but your price range and your demands of location are probably going to get you 4 of those 7. So make sure that in seeing 10 homes, you understand which 4 of those 7 must-haves each house has. And like, that's just a good way to realize, like, okay, we don't need updated bathrooms. And I think that's important for buying a home, and flexibility. And then the other thing that maybe was more personal for us in buying a home, let me think about this. I would say in buying a home, price is important, but like being flexible with the things you must have, I find people to be too rigid in like their price searches for homes. These are long-term purchases, 5, 10, 15, 30 years, and to like cut yourself off over $5,000,
It's silly.
I think it's really silly.
Yeah.
And I think the flexibility in home budgets, I'm sure people have different fiscal mentalities, but like I really think, I mean, we jumped from 2-bed to 3 beds. We jumped from hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we realized like, yeah, that was a bad idea. So I'm glad we didn't spend that. But you should definitely be more flexible than maybe your gut tells you with prices.
And thinking back to when you were renting, what was that process like, or how did you make the transition? How were you like, I know I want to buy. This is what I'm going to do next, or this is what we're going to do next. What was the genesis of it?
My wife.
Yeah.
I didn't want to buy. We weren't engaged. Like I knew I was going to pop the question, but when I told my parents we were buying a house, they were like ready to slap me back to Sunday. They were like, you're getting engaged before you're getting engaged by buying a home together, right? And I was like, yeah, but like I think she's the one. So like, they'll take the risk, and the risk paid off. But Janelle definitely made that decision. It was like the best decision we could have made because it was maybe early, but I think it helped us save a lot of money to sort of, cover a lot of the costs of our own wedding, do the honeymoon we wanted. I think it allowed us to buy this new place just by buying earlier than a lot of our friends did, because you're renting, that money goes away.
Yeah.
And now it was also smart the price we bought it at because it was well underneath what we would have paid.
Yeah.
Our mortgage was versus renting. But the process was definitely like Janelle's dream of owning real estate. We actually bought this place hoping to start, like sort of like our little Janelle and Nick real estate conglomerate and eventually rent it out. And we didn't do that for a number of reasons, but I think the desire to sort of like invest in real estate has always been on both of our minds and definitely one of her dreams. So that process was, unique maybe. I think other people, it's much more binary. It's like renting money, I'm just giving money to somebody else. Why wouldn't I give money back to myself in buying a home?
I think that's great. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate your time this morning. I wish Janelle was here with us, but it was great. You did a fantastic job. Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, thanks, John. No problem.
Okay.